Or I'll just repeat what I just said. We ran a couple minutes late on the last agenda item, and so we're just going to wait for Councillor Lehman to come back, and we'll get started in hopefully another minute or two. All right, I think we have everybody here, so we'll call this meeting to order. Ms. Foster, for the record, it's 2:36. Just first and foremost, just a couple housekeeping announcements. I'm going to be chairing the meeting today, despite the fact that Chair Toth is quite literally sitting right next to me. She's a little under the weather. Her voice is scarce at points, so she'll be right here to answer any questions that we have, but I'm going to chair the meeting today if there's any questions as to why that is. Another housekeeping item, you'll notice that for the first time in a little bit, we have a full contingent of our board. Our full contingent is 7 members. We were down to 4 at one point, and now I just want to welcome on behalf of the board, Mayor Josh Morgan, Councillor Steve Lehman, Councillor Susan Stevenson. They were officially sworn in on November 25th as members of the board, but today is actually their first official police board meeting. And so on behalf of Chair Toth, on behalf of the members, on behalf of Chief and Deputy Chiefs and everybody, we just want to say formally, welcome to your first meeting. Thank you. We're looking forward to working with you, and it really is a privilege to work with you guys there. So they've been here since, what, 9 o'clock? So wall-to-wall meeting since that time. So thank you very much for joining us. With that, are there any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Got it. I know my mic is flashing here, so I'm not sure what that means. But can you hear me online? Nancy, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, I'm not sure. It's flashing, so I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. All right. Perfect, thank you. All right, so no disclosures of interest from any of the board members. Moving on to new business. Do any members today have any new business for the meeting? Okay, seeing none. I know that there's an addendum. There's a police response to swatting calls, police treatment of transgendered individuals. That I believe Ms. Foster's already part of the package there, so we don't actually need to add that as a new item, but we'll just bring that to the board's attention. And with that, we'll move right into the first report. So Deputy Chief Betts, we have you up with the Internet Child Exploitation, ICE presentation, so I'll pass it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I'm just here really to introduce Detective Jeremy Dan. Jeremy is a member, and he's really a backbone here in the Internet Child Exploitation Unit. He's been in that unit for 8.5 years, 5 years as a constable, last 3.5 years as a supervisor and the detective in that area, which when you hear what their presentation is all about, you're going to recognize just the dedication it takes to commit to this type of work. Some of the most devastating types of things that you could possibly imagine. And, you know, tremendous work, not just to Jeremy, but to many of his team who are here as well. So Jeremy's going to walk us through a short 10 to 12 minute presentation on what they do. Because of some technical limitations, he wasn't able to be in the room for this portion of things. However, when his actual presentation is done, we'll invite him to come into the room to answer any questions you may have, as I suspect there will be lots. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Sergeant Dan, can you hear us on your end? Doesn't look like. Sergeant Dan, if you can hear us, if you're muted on your end, you may need to unmute because we. All right, well, if you can hear us, somebody's coming to your office right now. All right. There he is right there. Deputy Chief Betts, maybe while we're waiting, might as well fill that time for my benefit, for the benefit of others that might be listening in. Is Sergeant Dan going to be talking about ICE, the background of ICE, what they do, or is that something that maybe you can give us a little taste of what's to come?
Yeah, so Sergeant Dan's going to provide us with a bit of an overview of what their unit does, the types of investigations, the complexities of those investigations. He's going to walk us through 3 case studies, some examples of the type of cases they've been on, some of the difficulties that or that they will encounter in terms of being able to conclude their types of investigations. And when you see what it is that they're looking for and where they're looking for it, it's almost a literal needle in a haystack in terms of some of the devices and things that they're searching for. So I'll just, I'm sure Jeremy will give us a thumbs up when he's ready to go. Some of the cases they're going to refer to, you'll see people, there's actual people, but we've blurred their faces out to protect, for the long term. We recognize that the people they're going to speak about, these are all concluded cases, so they've all been dealt with through the courts. However, we also recognize from a privacy perspective that will live on the internet forever afterwards, so we will blur those out. And we'll try and make sure that, and actually this is probably a good point to put a sort of a bit of a disclaimer around potential triggers for anybody who may be watching. Is the subject matter that we'll be talking about is particularly sensitive in terms of, when you think about some of our youngest, most vulnerable members of the community, children, and quite literally right in the name of that is exploitation of those children. And of course, in this case, the medium is through the internet. So.
And how long is ICE?
I would try unplugging.
Oh, there we go.
And seeing if
It's
that
this
helps.
device. Is it? Yeah.
Can you hear us? We can hear you now.
Now it wants to do the Dell display audio speakers. Let's go.
If it's okay with the board, maybe while we're waiting for them to figure out the IT issues, we could maybe move on to some of the more procedural things, get the minutes out of the way, get some stuff, and maybe that'll buy us some time, and then come back to the presentation. That's okay? Okay. All right. So members, in your agenda package, you have the minutes from the November 7th, 2022 meeting. Assuming you've had an opportunity to review them, are there any questions, points of clarification arising from the minutes?
Maybe because we
Okay. Seeing none, can I get a mover that the minutes of the November 7th, 2022 Public London Police Services Board meeting be adopted as presented? I get a mover for that. Chair Toth, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Moving along, agenda item number 5. We have a series of public correspondence that were listed in the package there. I'm going to dispense with going through them in detail, but more generally, there was letters of congratulations to elected members of the 2022-2026 Municipal Council. There was a letter from Mayor Morgan to my right, to Chair Toth on my left here, acknowledging receipt and saying thank you. Chair Toth put the annual chair's message into the London Police Association Observer magazine. And then there was letters to the LPS chaplains with regards to their annual stipends. There was Imam Abdul Fattah Tawakkol, Reverend David Carruthers, Rabbi Catherine Clark, and Father James Mockler, who have been serving the board for various intervals over the years there. And so there was just letters to deal with that. And they're just, anyone who's had a chance to meet any of them know how incredible the work they provide and the services they provide to the London Police and their passion for this. And so that deals with that there. So with that, are there any questions or clarification coming from any of the correspondence that came in? Nope. Okay. So with that, can I get a motion that the board receives for informational purposes the December package of public correspondence, moved by Member Walker, seconded by Councillor Stevenson. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. All right, let's check with IT here. Sergeant Dan, can you hear us?
Well, we can hear them.
Can you guys say something on your end? Well, if they can't hear us, they can't say anything. All right. Yeah, they don't need to hear us. We just have to hear them, right?
Right.
So, yeah. And then Sergeant Dan can pop in for.
Yeah.
Well, if we can hear them,
No, if we can hear them.
then
let's-
Sergeant Dan
yeah.
can come in for the question portion afterwards, and we just deal with it that way, right?
Yep.
So, assuming that we can hear them. And apologies to folks here. This is actually only our second time we've done a hybrid meeting. It worked flawlessly the first time. We got cocky, and this is what we may have expected on the first one here. But
Okay, good.
So you can do the presentation, because nobody's gonna be asking questions till after, and then we'll have you come in after. So I think we can hear.
Okay, I haven't been able to hear anyone yet.
No,
So-
no, but we can hear you.
So we good, we got it.
So you can do the presentation, and then when you're done, you can come in and you can ask questions. No, because we're just gonna start, I think.
I just want to confirm that I can hear the other speakers in the room.
You
'Cause that's
won't,
what I mean.
no, you won't be able to hear anybody, but while you're doing your presentation, we can hear you, and then as soon as you're done, you can come in, and then people will ask questions at the end.
There we go, we're good. Now, where's the sharing screen portion? Is it already shared? Can you still see that on the screen? You can see his presentation still?
I can check if we still can.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. One thing here.
Where's the sharing screen? Or-
It was right here, and I already did that.
Great,
And just the slideshow version?
all right. I think when you're on mute, we should be good now.
Can you just stay for a second? That's okay. Is it not showing? I gotta get this. Okay. I can't hear you folks at all. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the technical difficulties on our end. It's always great when the computer people can't quite get it together. We did have it working, and then all of a sudden, I'm not sure what happened. Okay, so I'm just gonna start. If anybody needs me to stop for any reason, you just wave or something, okay? So first of all, thank you very much, Deputy Chief Betts, for your introduction. Although I didn't hear it, I'm sure it was very nice. Thank you all for making time for me today. When I listen to people speak, I find it interesting to know a little bit about them, try to understand where they're coming from. And so just to provide you with a little perspective, I am a police officer, yes, as you probably know from the introduction, but I'm also a dad. My wife is a police officer with our service. She works in the sexual assault and child abuse section. Her team's office is right next door to my team's office. Our cases often overlap and our teams often work together, which is quite nice. Our kids are 10 and 9, so right on the verge of internet danger zone. As you can probably understand, we are both passionate about keeping our own and all children safe from sexual predators, both on the internet and everywhere else. I'd also like to mention that some of what we're going to be talking about today is unpleasant. Although there is no graphic content whatsoever in this presentation, it can still be triggering, especially for anyone that has personally experienced sexual abuse. So if anyone is feeling uncomfortable as I'm speaking, please feel free to step outside, take a break. I understand this. I'm not going to take that personally at all. So a couple of facts about our unit. The ICE unit was created in 2007, and that was as a response to an identified need in our community. Children at that point were being victimized on the internet, and there was a need for qualified investigators. Keep in mind, this was 15 years ago. The internet was fairly new in comparison to now. At that time, the unit consisted of 2 officers. There were a detective and a detective constable. In 2012, a 3rd officer was added. I was lucky enough to be involved in our unit at that point. As of this moment in time, our team consists of 3 investigators, myself and two others. As our name suggests, internet child exploitation, our role is to investigate internet-based crimes involving the exploitation of children. The London Police Service is lucky enough to be one of 27 agencies belonging to the Ontario Provincial Strategy to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation on the internet. This strategy is a coordinated province-wide approach to combat internet crimes against children. In short, our unit is part of a province-wide team of investigators who work together, train together, support each other, and have all the same goals of protecting our children from online predators. Internet crimes against children generally fall within 2 main areas of the law. The first is internet luring. Internet luring is simply any telecommunication between an offender and a child which is done to facilitate or make easier the commission of a sexual crime against that child. An example which we run into quite often is a parent finding a chat on their child's device in which an offender is asking the child to take and send sexual images. Examples of the sexual offenses that qualify for this offense are sexual assault and sexual interference. Actually, any sexual offense that can be committed in regard to a child, the communication to facilitate that is also a crime. The second area of the law we deal with most often is child pornography. The legal definition is found in the Criminal Code. This is a visual depiction of a person under the age of 18 years, either engaged in sexual activity or with a focus on the sexual organs. The term child pornography is somewhat outdated. There is a concern that it equates child sexual abuse material with adult pornography. There is a bill, a private member's bill, currently in the House of Commons, which intends to update the term child pornography to child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. You may hear me reference that terminology today. There are 4 different offenses related to child pornography that we investigate: production, possession, distribution, and accessing. There are a variety of ways that cases come to our attention, both reactive ways and proactive. The number and ways that cases come to us really is too varied for me to cover them all today. I'm going to try to give you a few examples of common ones, though. One example of a proactive way we become involved in a case is our use of undercover chat operations. In these cases, we are chatting online, posing as children or adults with access to children. We're communicated with like-minded offenders, and we're looking for offenses to be committed. And when they are, we are able to make arrests. The interesting thing about these cases is currently when offenders are arrested and convicted of these sorts of crimes in these scenarios, they're looking at 2+ years of custody, so federal sentences. An example of reactive ways that cases come to us are reports submitted by our citizens when they have personally experienced these crimes. One example would be a parent finding that sexual chat between their child and an offender. In this example that I'm using, the child victim resides here in London, Ontario. The offender in that scenario may also live here, or he may live somewhere else, another province, another country, even another continent. In those cases, what we do is begin a victim-based investigation, so statements, processing of devices, and then send our work to the police in the area that the offender lives. This same scenario often happens in reverse, where the victim lives somewhere else and the offender lives here. In that instance, we continue the work that another police service has begun. It's actually quite interesting. We're much more likely to work with police from other countries than we are to work with some of the police officers in our very own service. Many of the cases we receive originate in the United States from companies like Google, Microsoft, and Instagram. In the United States, service providers have a legal duty to report when they become aware of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. By law, they must make a report to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC. This happens an awful lot, and as a result, a massive number of reports are generated in this way. Part of what the service providers report is the CSAM content itself, as well as the IP address used to upload it. When the IP address leads back to Canada, NCMEC sends a referral to the RCMP in Ottawa. The RCMP manages an organization called the NCECC, or the National Child Exploitation Crime Center. The NCECC, in fact, receives investigations from around the world, all pertaining to the sexual exploitation of children. Investigators at the NCECC coordinate these investigations, disseminate those to respective agencies around the world. Just for interest's sake, the NCC, and to try to illustrate the scope of what we're dealing with, the NCECC received approximately 50,000 reports of child exploitation offenses in 2018. In 2019, this number almost doubled. And I'm going to get into some very specific statistics and numbers at the end of the presentation, and I'll go into more depth at that point. But in 2021, LPS ICE, our team, received 223 referrals from the NCECC, all involving internet child exploitation. Okay, so that's covering most of the legal jargon type stuff. Let's get into how we actually do our job, which is catching the offenders. In order to track down offenders, more often than not, we are starting with an IP address, an internet protocol address, for anyone that hasn't heard the term. In simplest terms, this is your home's pipeline to the internet. Service providers such as Rogers and Bell keep track of which of their pipes go to which homes. With an authorization from a justice, in other words, a production order, ICE investigators can ask for and receive information about which home is using the suspect pipe or IP address at the time the offense was committed. Keep in mind, this is just a starting point. We now know where the crime was committed, not necessarily who is responsible. Keep in mind, our ultimate goal is to identify the person responsible for these offenses so that person can be held criminally liable. We must identify who, with access to the internet service at that address, is responsible for committing the crime. Often a whodunit scenario for us. We go in always with an open mind, considering everybody innocent until our evidence suggests otherwise. So step by step, our cases, I've said, start with a production order to the service providers, for example, Rogers, asking for what home was the internet used to commit the crime. We then do a background on the subscriber, the resident, who lives there, who visits there, who may have access to the internet service there, what devices are likely to be our critical pieces of evidence. What lawful means do we have to locate and seize that evidence? Often this involves hours of surveillance by our team, as well as our mobile surveillance unit and our intel unit. We try to use as many resources as we possibly can. When we have got all our ducks in a row, so to speak, in terms of a pool of suspects, we then apply for a search warrant. Again, a lengthy explanation to a justice is required why we need to enter a private residence seeking evidence which will assist in identifying an offender. Again, the purpose of the investigation is to identify the person responsible, to locate the evidence sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which is always our standard, that the accused has committed the offenses in question. In a residence with more than one individual and partial or full sharing of device usage, it's often necessary to establish a pattern of usage to get beyond that reasonable doubt threshold. This takes often hours of analysis of every device seized both by us and by our partners, the Digital Forensics Unit. Each case is unique. The crucial piece of evidence may be a cell phone, a thumb drive, even a micro SD card, which is about the size of a thumbnail. If we miss that crucial item, we may have nothing. And it's quite challenging because this is a typical warrant scene. This photo actually comes from a search that we did. And as the arrows point out, it's pretty difficult to locate a micro SD, thumbnail size micro SD card in that mess. Referral information is often regarding distribution of child exploitation material using social media or instant messaging. These platforms are most often accessed using a cell phone. It's often crucial that we locate the specific device that was used to commit that exact crime. Therefore, we can only execute our search of the residence when the specific device is present. So searches are challenging. Finding that crucial piece of evidence is extremely challenging. Another factor is offenders trying to hide that crucial piece of evidence, both from police and from anyone else living in the home, including their spouse. This picture, again, comes from an actual search that we did where the offender had hollowed out the bottom of a console in the love seat. And the laptop, which was our crucial piece of evidence in that case, was hidden in a cutout underneath, and absolutely no one knew. Our investigation response unit helped us with that search, and they actually did an amazing job and were able to find that. Again, that was a crucial piece of evidence. That offender has entered a plea of guilt. So I'm going to walk you now through a case study, and what I'm hoping is that this is going to clarify and sort of bring together what we do, everything I've talked about to this point, and sort of have it make a bit more sense to you. So our team got this referral in 2020. This is what a referral from NCMEC looks like. As you remember, that's the agency in the United States that takes reports from the major service providers. This one actually came from Yahoo. Yes, Yahoo does still exist for anyone that has an old Yahoo account. It came to us as a low priority, and the report included an IP address, a bunch of clues that became important later, but also the CSIM content, which in this case was a group of digital photos. The photo showed an adult man and woman engaged in sexual acts while a nude boy appeared to be video recording what they were doing. So upon seeing this, we immediately upgraded the priority level to urgent, as the images in the referral indicate the offenders had access to children. There are several clues, as I mentioned. One of these was GPS data that was embedded in a photo that led us almost directly to one of the offender's residence. There was also an alternate email included in the report, which was very helpful. Long story short, we worked immediately on this case. We got the file, I think, in the afternoon, and we worked through the night. We identified all of the adults involved, including the children. And by 6 a.m. the following morning, we had search warrants ready to be executed, one here in London, one in Goderich. With the help of the OPP, we were able to execute those without incident, seize all of the devices that we needed. Several adult parties were arrested. All of the children were taken to a place of safety. What we found was that the male offender had a large quantity of video and image evidence. What he had been doing was providing the cameras that are shown in this slide, which look like phone chargers. He'd been providing those to both women. They had been hidden in their residences. They were using those cameras to record their children in showers, in bedroom settings, changing. And one of the women, the lady from Goddard, had also been involving her children in actual sex acts with the male offender for money. The abuse had been going on for many years, in one instance, almost 10 years. Literally, the material we had showed the children progressing in age, quite awful. As a result, 3 adults were charged, 65 criminal counts were laid. The mother making the videos of her children with the cameras was given a 4-year sentence. The mother that was involving her children in the actual sex acts for money was given a 9-year sentence. The male offender, who we believe was the driving force behind the whole scenario, received an 8.5-year sentence. But most importantly, 8 victims were identified and safeguarded. I realized I sort of cut into my own time with my mishap at the beginning, but if there's interest at the end of the presentation in the Q&A, we can talk about the challenges. I'm not sure that I have enough time left because I want to make sure that I highlight some of the statistics that I've included today. This first report comes from Stats Canada. It was released earlier this year. It shows the increase in incidents of online child exploitation reported to police between the years 2014 and 2020. The totals are reporting rates per 100,000 population. The offenses I mentioned earlier, internet luring and child pornography offenses, form the bulk of the reports. They are the blocks of light blue, dark blue, and green. You can see a clear linear increase over the years, and that's just 2020. So this next, excuse me, this next slide shows specific numbers taken from our team. This is a graph plotting the total number of cases received by our team between the years 2019 and 2022. So far this year, LPS ICE, our team has received 385 new cases, which is 36 more cases than in all of 2021, an increase in more than 10% over last year. You can see that in 2019, we received less than 100 total cases and less than 50 from the NCECC. So it's very difficult for us as 3 investigators to keep up with the sheer volume of cases coming in. This graph, I think, clearly illustrates that fact. This plots our work being done between the years 2015 and 2022. And we've broken it down into the benchmarks that we think reflect our work best, which is the number of offenders arrested, the number of criminal charges processed, the number of judicial authorizations obtained. Of course, that's production orders and search warrants, and most importantly, the number of victims identified. What you don't see in this graph is a clear increase. There are some one-offs. For instance, 2016 had a larger than average number of victims identified, and 2022 has had a larger than average number of criminal charges processed. There's no overall pattern of increase year over year. I believe that our team is running at the max capacity for 3 members. In other words, we're doing the amount of work that 3 investigators can do. I believe that there's more that we can do if we were to have more resources. As previously explained, each case is complex, some more than others. They take many hours to complete. In 2021, as I mentioned, we received 223 cases just from the NCECC and 349 new cases in total. That's nearly 1 case per day. Any of these cases may point our unit to the types of offenders and victims that were identified in the case study that I talked about. I think I used up a little bit more than my share of the time today. Thank you so much for that, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to come in there in a moment, and will be no technology barrier between us.
So we'll just wait for Sergeant Dan to come into the actual room, and then through you, Deputy Chief, we can ask questions. Yep. Thanks, Sergeant Dan. So, no, he's not here. So over to you, Deputy Chief Betts.
Thanks for that, Chair. And I just really want to say thanks, Jeremy. Thanks to your team. As I'm sure you can appreciate, you've heard some of the statistics. You've heard, the impact that this is having. More than a case a day. It's a child a day. And I'm going to say a child, but I'm going to suggest that in many of these cases, there's more than one child involved a day. This is London. This isn't all of Canada. This is our city that this is happening, that these cases are coming to, and we're seeing an increase in that, which is why we really thought it was important that we bring this presentation to the board so that you hear about the tremendous work these folks are trying to do to keep our kids safe. So I can't say it better than any questions you may or answers you may want of Jeremy, and I know that you're prepared.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Members, based on the presentation that was provided, are there any questions or questions of clarification for Deputy Chief Betts or Sergeant Dan with regards to the presentation? Chair Toth.
I have many questions, but maybe I could just start with a couple. I wouldn't mind if you went through some of the challenges. I know you skipped over that, but I think it's important for the board and the public to know what they are. I'd love to know, I was listening to you talk about you have a team of 3 with increasing caseload and you're kind of hit your max. An ideal world, what kind of team would you want to have in place if you could, if there's a magic wand? And then maybe if you can speak a little, I can't begin to imagine the profound impact on these kids, but there's vicarious trauma, and maybe you could speak a little to how you and your team deal with that. Is there sort of a finite time where you really can't spend more than this amount of time on this unit? That's a lot. I'll just stop right there.
Would you like me, maybe I can start with the last part of your question, the vicarious trauma part. And we're very lucky. We know that we're well looked after in London. We have procedures in place. We have doctors that are readily available. I literally just had my meeting with Dr. Connell last week. I've known the man, every year that I've worked in the ICE unit. I feel we have a relationship. He's checking in on me. I'm talking through this case happened, or that bad case, or that case happened. This is when I got home, how I dealt with it. And I'm blessed to have a wife that works in the same field, and we're sounding ideas off of each other. And we sort of recognize that the emotional stresses that go with working on these cases. And so we do have a tenure for a detective constable spot, which I was at one point. It's 5 years. And there's wellness checks constantly. We're keeping tabs on one another. We're seeing the doctor. We're doing annual personality inventories, making sure that there aren't changes. And we're just keeping a very close eye. I mentioned the provincial strategy in my talk. It was near the beginning. But we're also blessed to be involved there because they have their own wellness committee. They have members that whenever we meet for training sessions are talking about, this is what we're doing in our office to combat vicarious trauma. And it's a constant brainstorm of best ideas and best practices. So I feel that we're well looked after. I've been doing this a long time. I feel healthy. Dr. Connell thinks I'm healthy. I know I can go down and talk to Dr. Khan anytime. I have done that. And I actually told Dr. Connell about our meeting today, and he said, good luck. So anyway, I don't know if he'll be impressed with the IT issues we had at the beginning. But so we're very well looked after. So there's that part of it. The challenges that we face in terms of our cases, I don't have the bullet points back in front of me now. I believe I had 4 of them there. And they're challenges. They maybe create more hoops for us to jump through in order to be successful at the end of the day, which, as I explained, is to hold offenders criminally liable, convict them in court, have them sentenced, keep them away from children. That's the goal. And it has just, since I started in 2010, a variety of factors have worked at making it more complex, making it harder. For instance, devices. I mean, when I started, we would go in and look for a computer tower. Now we're looking for, a mini USB or sorry, a mini SD card is a good example. We've literally proved cases based just on a floppy disk, and crimes are committed using mobile devices versus towers. We have to ensure that we get that device and that our digital forensic unit has the capability of getting into the device. And hopefully the offender hasn't been very sneaky and deleted the crucial evidence that we're going to need. So technology is sort of working against us. Children spending more time in front of devices, more time on the internet. The pandemic, for instance, unsupervised access to the internet. Quite frankly, if there was no unsupervised access to the internet for anyone under 12, 80% of my job would disappear, which I'd be super happy about. So it's a perfect storm of things. When I first started in 2010, we could also, when we knew that an internet-based crime against children had been committed, I could go directly to Rogers as part of the PIPEDA legislation and ask for subscriber information. That changed in 2014 with the Spencer ruling. And there was a reasonable expectation of privacy, and I'm all for privacy, I really am. In the circumstance, though, where maybe it slows down or inhibits the ability to identify these offenders, maybe an exception could be made. But I get it. It's a complicated, challenging subject. Nobody wants the state eyeballing everyone, including me. So there's that part of it. We're also challenged by our court system. Prior to the pandemic setting in, our local courts were running a machine basically in the red line. A lot of our cases, so I did have some slides in there about court and timeline, and I'm not sure if everybody understands, but when a criminal charge is laid, we go on what we call a Jordan timeline. There is a time period where that case has to progress to trial. Okay. In some cases, it's 18 months. For Supreme Court or Superior Court matters, it's 2 years. So as soon as we lay a charge, we're on a clock essentially. And prior to the pandemic, our local Crown's office was struggling to get those timelines met. And no fault of their own. I'm certainly not pointing any fingers at them. We have a great relationship with our Crown's office. But when the pandemic hit and a lot of court venues closed down, that race car went from being in the red to ready to explode. And unfortunately, that's impacted some of our cases. They're just not meeting the timelines. We have literally had local offenders had to stay at proceedings because the timelines have been violated. So I think that covers everything that I had planned to earlier. Was there another piece of your question, or?
Your dream team numbers.
Oh, gee, I don't even know what to say to that, because the increases are like this right now, and there's no reason not to expect next year. The point I was trying to make with the slide showing that 2022 is worse even than 2021 by about 11%, is that there's no reason for us to expect 2023 to be less, or 2024, right? My thought is that there needs to be more proactive, more instruction to parents, like let's keep these kids off the internet. That's what has to happen. So we're going in the wrong direction. I get it that a municipal service is never going to have the resources to properly staff that unit or provide that dream team. I totally know that. And if we had triple the number of investigators, I have no doubt that we would have triple the number of victims identified, triple the number of offenders, triple the number of years spent in prison when they're held accountable for the offenses. I don't think that has triple the amount of manpower to give to me. I really don't. So all I can do is explain the situation that we're facing, and I think you guys all can see that it's important work, and we truly believe in it. And
Thanks, sir.
is there anything else?
Well, that's my next question. So I have a couple questions, but I'll go to the end. No, please, Member Walker, I'll leave it to the end. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for your extraordinary work. And when you said that perhaps somebody wouldn't be impressed, I think it's not the technology that we were paying attention to. It was your words and your PowerPoint, and it's very impressive and very impactful. So thank you. I just wanted to, I agree with you that more needs to be done. And I always believe in a three-prong approach, which involves fully funded or robust funding for resources, police intervention, and also community involving parents. And I believe that is most important because we can have the best trained officers, but if they don't have a support system behind them, or if they don't have the legislation behind them, then they can go in and do all of this work, but not accomplish anything. And in the same way that if we have community members or parents taking action, but no police reinforcement, again, it seems counterintuitive or counterproductive. So I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's a good reminder of how important all of these links are within our communities. I am in some respects encouraged by some of the things that are going on right now with respect to pornography and child exploitation into pornography. And you will likely know this better than me, but Pornhub, which is the largest company circulating illegal and explicit non-adult pornography, has recently been closed down. So they have had their funding removed from all of their credit card people. The police have become involved, and they're really no longer available to the public. And that is really important because so many children and young adults or youth are engaged without knowing in exploitation, or certainly without authority at their age. And those images and videos are then loaded onto sites like Pornhub. And as you said earlier, once they're up there, you really can't get them down. But in this case, I think that was a huge win. And I think that is something we really need to celebrate. And sometimes we don't celebrate enough around the accomplishments. The other thing is, you mentioned that child pornography is defined in the Criminal Code of Canada. And isn't it unbelievable that they would actually call it child pornography as the definition, as if it's a mutually engaged upon act? And even CSAM, I'm not in favor of. I think we really need to call it what it is, which is childhood sexual exploitation. And it harms communities, and it harms families, and it certainly harms children. So I just wanted to mention that. With respect to a question, I did want to talk about the situation in York Region, which Deputy Chief Betts would know about, where the Project Raphael was a groundbreaking initiative where they kind of set up men and requested who do they want, and more than 100 men attempted to purchase children for the purpose of sexual assault, exploitation. And I was really just absolutely amazed at the time that so many men would blatantly say, no, I want a child. Some of them, even, as you would know, Deputy Chief Betts outlined the age of the children that they were interested in. And there were 100 men charged, and in this particular case, which is unusual, the 4 of those men took this up through the courts into the Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada recently ruled that there was no case. It was thrown out. And most importantly to me, and I think probably to you around this specific case, is that they said that the court said that undercover officers and investigators can pose as underage girls to arrest these kinds of men. So, having said all of that, I did want to ask you a little bit more about the vicarious trauma but in a different context. Given the amount of work that goes into this, and given the impact on children and the impact on officers who, as you say, are seeking support, which is so incredible and wonderful that you're doing that, I did want to ask you, how impactful is it for you as an officer investigating child sexual exploitation to have the courts either dismiss the cases or disbelieve the child, or alternatively not impose a sentence?
It's beyond frustrating.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beyond. It's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's really heartbreaking. I had a trial maybe 3 weeks ago. It was the last week in October, because that was the month that we had done our big Project Maverick, which you may have seen. And I was unavailable the full last week of the month because I had a jury trial, and we literally came within a hair of an acquittal. It ended up, the jury came back actually quite quickly with a guilty verdict, but the court system had not worked well for this particular victim. She'd been subject to a preliminary hearing and a trial that went all the way through until the closing remarks, and then amounted to a mistrial. And then at the end of trial 2, which was not any more pleasant than trial 1, we literally were questioning, how can we get, is there any way that we're going to get past reasonable doubt here? And I truly believe that if it had been a judge alone, we might not have. But the jury, people of our community, came back quite quickly with a guilty verdict. And it was, I don't even know the feeling. Like it's emotional for us. It really is. Like it was incredible. So things like that, where you can like help that victim. Oh my, I think when I leave this unit, there won't be anything else that has the same reward. I don't think there would be. So
I really appreciate your response and your honesty. And I do think at some point, not today or tomorrow, of course, but at some point it would be amazing to have the board get involved in helping to develop a task force or something to address what is going on in the courts and the continual support of perpetrators at the expense of victims. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you and the work you're doing and your team. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Walker. We'll go Councillor Lehman, and then I'll go after you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sergeant Dan. When I took on this role, you steel yourself to the fact that you're going to be presented with things that you might not normally see. I can think of nothing more heinous than crimes against our innocents and our children. The more we seem to do on our end, the more criminals find ways to get around through technology or other ways. But I do see a choke point, and you touched on that. That's the entrance of the internet into our homes. I see children using iPads before they can walk. The accessibility is incredible. So I guess my question to you is, there's the other side is prevention, and I guess it comes down to education. Now, obviously, educating families that are not like the families we've heard about here, that's a different case. But educating families on what I think they inherently know, the dangers of the internet out there, but I don't know if they know, for example, what we heard here or how far it can go, and how easily it is that these guys, they're so skilled at luring innocents. How important it is to control access, supervised access to the internet. So the question to you is, how do you see our local police force? What's our involvement should be? What are we doing, and what should we be doing in educating the public on what is happening out there and the importance of supervised access for our youth?
So there's a lot of things that we're doing. there is an incredible nonprofit organization that works out of Winnipeg. They're called C3P, the Canadian Center for Child Protection. And their role, their biggest role, there's many, but their biggest role is developing educational materials for parents, for children, for schools, for churches, all different age groups. So if you're 14 or 15, they have material that's suited for you. If you're 8 or 9, they have material that's suited for someone else. We came very close to having, we worked very closely with them. We came very close to having an official partnership with them about 2 years ago. It didn't work out, although I suspect we'll probably readdress it at some point in the near future. They're incredible. We recommend them to parents constantly. Anytime that we do public talks similar to this, cybertip.ca or the Canadian Center for Child Protection is a resource that we literally hand out their contact information. They're amazing at what they do. A few years ago, we set up a program where we were training the school resource officers about internet safety so that they could then go to their schools, spend time in programming with the students, explaining sexting, the dangers, extortion, the whole gamut of the problems that you have already pointed out. And that was working really well. A few years ago, as you probably know, our school resource officers were removed from the schools, through nobody's fault, really. We're hoping, just maybe 2 weeks ago, I did a talk to our auxiliary program, and one of those officers approached me after and said, Jeremy, do you think you guys, me and my team, could train our auxiliaries and have them out in the community spreading that same message? Like, literally we can give them the information from C3P and just get it disseminated. So that's something we're working on. In the same month that we're doing the takedown, I had a lady from Thames Valley District School Board get in touch. She wanted to set up a time when we or one of my people could go and give a talk at the school board to teachers and parents. That's something that historically we've done. We're only 3 people, as we say, and our role is the criminal investigation part because no one else in London is doing that piece. So, we also are interested in being proactive in public education, but we try to make it to as big of groups as we can to maximize our bang for our buck, so to speak. So when Thames Valley got in touch a few weeks ago, I said, why don't you reach out to the Canadian Center for Child Protection and form an official partnership? And they're the experts at what we can also weigh in. But when we come and we talk to people, honestly, it's kind of like my presentation. It's a bit heavy. It's not pleasant. It can be even scary. And that's not the ideal message for parents or for kids or for anyone. And really, they have it down to a science. So I would like to see our organization officially partner with them. And, they will even train virtually our school boards, both of them, and get the message out that way. But there's so much more that can be done. And I completely agree with you. It is on our radar. It's something we dedicate time toward. And, it needs to happen. So.
Thank you, Sergeant Dan. Councillor, do you have a
Just a
follow-up?
follow up on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
For you to do that partnership, do you need direction from the board, or is that something that would come from administration?
No, it'll come from administration.
Okay.
Quite frankly, I'm not sure. We got it in the very late stages, and I think there was terminology that didn't quite get sorted out. I think that had our legal people sat down with theirs and could keep the language so that everybody was happy, I'm sure it can happen. Part of the onus is probably on me to circle back and say, hey, about this thing, is there any way that we can revisit it? That organization has partnerships with the majority of police services in Ontario that are part of the provincial strategy and across Canada. So they're excellent.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Yeah, Ms. Foster.
Sergeant Dan, Detective Dan, if I missed it, I'm sorry, but did you introduce your teammates?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
This
I would
is,
love for you to do
my
that.
bad. This
Yeah,
is
no.
JP Liberto and this is Jessica Lita.
Thank you to all three of you.
Which is actually a perfect segue into what I wanted to say there. So, uh, thank you to you, Sergeant Dan. Thank you, JP and Jessica. Thank you to ICE, to the London Police Service, but you guys in particular on this presentation. There are things that you see that you can't unsee, and you're shining a light into the dark recesses and dark corners of the internet that most of us don't even know exist. And as a member of this board, as a Londoner, as a father of 3 young children, as hard as it is to do your job, and nobody has any appreciation for what that would entail. The most sincere, heartfelt gratitude for protecting my kids and every other child out there in the city of London for that. And so it's the things we think but do not say, but I had to say to you, thank you for everything that the London Police Service and your team have done on this front. So with that, my question is this. And Chair Toth alluded to the mental health supports that exist, whether it's psychological support, whether it's resources. But that's post, right? You're in ICE and that's support that happens concurrently. Is there any specialized training, education, background that's required before an officer goes into the ICE unit, whether it's specialized education, whether it's, okay, well, you're about to join ICE. Is there some program? Is there some training that prepares you to see the things that you see, to deal with the things that you deal with? Or is it that you have that by virtue of your general training as an officer and you go into there? So
No one is ever
right
forced into this line of investigation. It's always a want to. And there is psychological testing that's done prior to entering the unit. Mm-hmm. And we always ensure that the person has full understanding of what they're getting into, mm-hmm. so they can make an educated choice. And so no, there isn't a training program prior to, but yes, there is sort of a job shadow where we're explaining every piece of what we do, what's going to be expected of a full-time investigator in there. So you go in with your eyes open, you have the psychological testing, of course, and then as soon as you're there, the monitoring starts. Like, we still okay here? So.
And then my follow-up question is just dealing with what I only have a vague understanding of, but something referred to as the dark web. So Member Walker talked about some pornography website, right? And talking about things that are accessible on the normal internet. But this dark web, from I understand, like none of us may know how to access it, which is probably a beautiful thing, right? But you would need to know how to access it and scan it, right? And so is there a level of technical knowledge or savvy that is required of members in ICE or through the London Police Service to navigate the dark web?
There really is, yes. And JP and I were lucky enough to travel to Dallas, Texas in August, and we made an intentional decision to attend as many dark net investigation sessions as we possibly could. Mm-hmm. And there's incredible work going on there. Like, you're right in thinking that no person with good intentions needs to go there. And we learned an awful lot. I believe that JP and I would be fully capable of conducting a darknet investigation. Mm-hmm. The problem, though, is it's impossible to geolocate it to London. And so as 3 investigators working for your board, for our service, we are always trying to focus on offenders or victims here in our city. And I talked about how, parents are finding those chats. The victim is here in London, but the offender could be anywhere in the world, literally. And so there's still a value to our community. The victim is here, right? And darknet investigations, you can get into a chat room, you can set up an undercover operation, which I believe we'd be fully capable of doing, but you can't ever bring it home to London. So it's sort of we have to sort of leave it in the hands of our federal agencies. Like, I truly believe that to do this properly, it ought to be a federal agency. They're the ones, more funding, more technology. They could fill a room with 50 people just to focus on the offenders in London. That's the ideal. I don't think as a municipal service we're ever going to get there. We do know about the darknet. We could do those investigations, and occasionally our offenders, when we swoop in and seize the devices, as I mentioned, it will turn into a spider web of offending. Like, we know about this little thing that Yahoo told us about, but when we get in, we find he's also doing this and this and this and this. One of the things that they're also sometimes involved in are darknet, trading of child pornography, etc. And there are indicators there. For instance, the Tor browser being installed in a device is one. And when we see that, our digital forensic unit, our investigators are fully capable of following up those leads. If that means that this offender has stored child pornography on a secure server somewhere, we're writing general warrants. We're trying to access that information to hold them fully accountable for everything they've done. So we know about it. And
Thank you, Sergeant Dan, for that presentation. I bet we could go for another hour with questions that we have, but thank you on behalf of the board for that presentation. Thank you, members, for your questions. And we have to move on the agenda there, but I suspect you have the gratitude of everybody around this table for everything you've done. So thank you very much. Thank you to you too as well. Appreciate it.
Make sure you say nice things when you're in your.
Can't believe that.
Yeah. All right. So thank you very much. I will push on with the agenda. We're obviously behind schedule, but I thought it was important to give the time necessary to have that question and answer there. So thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 6 in your package, we have the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, OIPRD service complaint. Deputy Chief Betts, so over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So before you is a service complaint that has been concluded, an investigation concluded by our professional standards branch. This is a bit of an unusual one in that this particular individual back in July had wanted us to let her know when her adult brother was being released from custody. He was brought into our custody intoxicated, danger to himself or others. And as you can probably appreciate from a privacy perspective, when there's an adult involved, we don't often disclose any information about that adult, regardless of who the requester is. In this case, with all the best of intentions, the intent was to let her know because her brother was not from London. However, during the course of a very busy night, the cadet who was tasked with, one of the cadets tasked with monitoring prisoner wellness, simply forgot to let her sergeant know that the sister had asked to be notified when her brother was being released from custody. In this particular case, the sergeant who was involved is an FSST, so standard field sobriety testing, qualified investigator, who's able to do proper criminal investigations into levels of intoxication, felt that this individual was safe to be released from custody, and he was subsequently released. His sister was upset that she did not get notified of his release, and hence the service complaint to the OIPRD. As you can see from the report in front of you, there was no misintent here by anybody involved. It was simply a memory lapse. And in fact, it was a best of intention to let know in a situation where we had no legal obligation to let know. So this is just bringing this information and this report to conclusion as with the requirement of the Police Services Act.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Members, any questions for Deputy Chief Betts with regards to the report he just provided? Nancy or Member Branscombe, you're not on the screen, so I'm not sure if you do have a question or not. Oh, there you are. So no question. Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing you. So, okay, with that, then can I get a member to move that the board receives for informational purposes the OIPRD service complaint report provided by Deputy Chief Betts, moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Stevenson. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Moving on in the agenda item number 7 in your package, we have the London Police Services Board Western Awards update. I'll look over to either Ms. Foster or Chair Toth, or I'm happy to provide it, but whoever wants to provide a little bit of an update or background.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a follow-up report to the award that we provide to dependents or members of the London Police Service. And the fund was started back in, I believe, the 60s. It started from a payment that Western wanted to pay to then Chief, oh goodness, his name will come to me in a second. It's in the report. Walter Johnson. And he did not want to be paid. He said, that's my public service, doing a talk at Western about my role as chief. And the money was put into an endowment fund, and then we take out the interest every year, and we help people with a little bit of their education costs within our organization. So we every year we let you know how much we paid out to how many students. So that's in the report. So I believe it was $265, which is probably the cost of a book nowadays, to 25 successful applicants for the award. So this is just the report on that one.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Any questions for Ms. Foster, anyone with regards to the report just provided, the Western Awards update? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion that the board receives for informational purposes the report related to the awarding of the LPSB Western Awards for 2022, moved by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Chair Toth. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Okay, moving on in the agenda item number 8, board committees, panels, and working groups. I don't know who wants to speak to that here, but I can provide a little bit of background. By virtue of the fact that we have 3 new members that have joined the board, Mayor Morgan and Councillors Lehman and Stevenson, and Chair Toth was recently reappointed for another 4-year term as well. We need to repopulate our committees, and so in our working groups and panels, and so we're going to be discussing who wants to be part of what in the upcoming little while there. And so we need new chairs and new members for the potentially the Finance Administration Committee, Risk Management Working Group, ARAP, which is the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel, MHAP, Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel, as well as other committees as well. So just wanted to put that into the public realm that we'll be doing that in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead there. So are there any questions with regards to those items from anyone? Yep, Chair Toth.
Thank you. One of the things, just to flag for members of the board as they consider what they want to be on, there's going to be a review in January of the committee system. Just for context, we had established the Finance and Governance Committee as a way to try to find some efficiencies for the board, and I believe what we'll find is that, unfortunately, despite best intentions, it seems to have not decreased our meeting. We're still meeting all day, and with the unintended side effect of actually having created a significant amount more work for Jen and now Mel. So keep that in mind. We may be going into January reconsidering whether or not it's worth keeping those committees. So if I might sort of predict the future, the big ones to really think about joining would be the ARAP and MHAP, and Risk Management Working Group for sure, because that was Mayor Ed Holder who is part of that. So we'll definitely need somebody on that. The Labor Negotiations Committee is currently Vice Chair Shabar, Member Branscombe, and Member Walker. We probably should add one more member there. The Deputy Chief Recruitment Committee right now is myself, the Vice Chair, and Member Branscombe. We could probably add a member there if somebody was interested. So those, I think, are probably the more critical ones to consider putting your name forward for. And again, the 2 advisory panels.
Thank you, Chair Toth, for that. So unless there's any discussion or questions, we don't need a motion with that. We can just move forward there. So, okay, moving on to the next thing. Agenda item number 9 in your package is a report from Chief Williams, the police response to swatting calls, police treatment of transgendered individuals. Chief, I'll pass it over to you for a report there.
Thank you, Chair. This is a follow-up to the so-called swatting incident in August of this year. I've spoken about it at a previous meeting when I was closing the loop on our review. Our members responded to a complaint of an individual who had threatened to come to City Hall and shoot people. They based their response on the time with the information they had. It was obviously quite serious, and they conducted an armed response and ended up attending a residence and arresting an individual. It was quickly determined that this was a swatting incident, so that's a false report designed to elicit an armed response. They de-escalated their investigation and released the individual once they determined that it wasn't a credible complaint. With the benefit of 2020 hindsight, questions arose about our response to this report of somebody who wanted to shoot people. That formed part of our review, the nature of our response. As well, the person who was taken into custody was a transgendered individual, as you're aware, and questions also arose about our treatment of that individual while she was in our custody at the police station. There's inaccurate information circulated about the individual being repeatedly dead named while she was in our custody. So faced with this information, as I indicated in August, I directed a full review occur, and that review has been completed and the report is before you. But to briefly summarize, excuse me, our officers responded, again, based on the information they had at the time, which resulted in an armed response. And I fully support the actions of the officers who acted based on information at the time. They acted as they did to protect the public and to protect themselves. And I believe the community expects that. With relation to our treatment of the individual who was arrested, much of the information circulated primarily through social media was not accurate. The individual's time in custody was captured on audio and video recordings. She was not repeatedly dead named. That did not occur. In fact, our officers were highly professional, as I previously stated, and I support them in this matter. Having said all of that, during our review, we did learn a few things about our systems and our gaps and some training opportunities. And this, I want to be really clear on this. This is not to say the officers on that day did anything wrong. I don't believe they did anything wrong. But there are opportunities to improve our organization insofar as our systems, and I'm talking about our records management system, and some training opportunities and some other gaps. Those are before you in the report. So the report fleshes out what those changes are, and I won't repeat them all, they're before you. For example, the mislabeled property bag, which we've all heard about. We've developed a way to work around that ever happening again. That was no individual's fault. If anything, it was a systemic issue, which we've dealt with. So subject to any questions, we have to answer.
Thank you for your report, Chief. Members, any questions for the Chief with regards to the report just provided? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Chief, for that report. I'll need a motion from one of the members that the board receive for informational purposes Chief Williams' report titled Police Response to Swatting Calls, Police Treatment of Transgendered Individuals. Moved by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you, Chief, for that report. Member Walker, moving on the agenda item number 10, femicide verbal update. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of things. First of all, a reminder that there were 173 women who were violently killed in 2021. At my last knowledge, there were 164 women and girls who have been killed so far this year in the first 11 months of this year. That was before the 3 women from Winnipeg we're including into the data, which, as you know, was a horrific situation. And I think we need to pay attention to the fact that serial killers oftentimes will kill women. and put them into dumpsters or landfills because they are considered to just be worthless and garbage, and they can do whatever they like to them, which is, I think, just a tragic reflection of what happens today in society with women. But so I'm really grateful to, as I said earlier, to Deputy Chief Betts for helping the board and me come up with a way to address this by defining femicide in the criminal code. We have been working towards a meeting with the ministers. We were offered a meeting with one of the staffers, which was great, but I think this is a really important issue, and rather than go through a third party, it does need to be addressed by those who are in a position of power and position to make decisions. To that end, we currently have MP Peter Fregaskatos' office investigating that meeting. And I received an email from Rangaus yesterday who indicated that they are continuing to request that both ministers' offices, Minister of Justice and was it Minister Ian's office? Yeah, status of women, and that Peter and his staff continue to advocate for a meeting as soon as possible and continue to follow up. But as of this point, we don't have a meeting. We do have an expert panel in place, really amazing experts from, you know, the BIPOC community and everybody else who are willing to contribute to this dialogue. So that is really exciting to bring people together, but unfortunately at this point there's no meeting. And I should say it's not really totally the minister's fault. We had the Days of Action to End Male Violence Against Women. We had December 6th. And of course, locally we had the Shine the Light campaign. So it's been difficult to facilitate a meeting, but in the new year, and starting in early January, we're hoping that we can get that underway. So that is my news on femicide. And again, to remind people that this is the only police service in Canada who has taken this position. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Members, any questions from Member Walker based on the report just provided? Okay. Seeing none, I'll just need a motion that the board receive Member Walker to the update.
Nancy, I just praised you for your work with MHAP. Thank you so much. We had no meetings. We intended to have meetings, but again, you know, holidays and everything got in the way of having the meetings. And we're also looking to repopulate. We would like to repopulate the committee. So we're asked, it's a great committee if you're interested in joining. And we will be restarting our work in the new year. And they're really doing great work. So it's a great committee to be on.
Thanks, Member Walker. When you praise Nancy, make sure the mic's on next time. She needs to hear it from time to time.
Unbelievable, Nancy. I did that at the last meeting as well. So I'm sorry.
Okay, I was getting good vibes.
Yeah. All right. So Mayor Morgan, question.
Yes, perhaps just a question about the work of the committee. Anything you can share about like the scope of the committee's work would be helpful, because I want to understand it better. I'm certainly willing to serve on it, and the reason why is because through the Ontario Big City Mayors, I've taken on a role with Mayor Patterson to help prep the big city mayors on a requested meeting that we've asked for on homelessness, mental health, addictions, and the states of downtowns. And as you know, certainly the mental health and addictions area impacts many organizations, including the police. So anything we can do to cross coordinate efforts, I think is very helpful. I'm unsure of the work that's been done so far here, but I would love to get up to speed at some point, if not now, at a later date, to ensure that the work that I might be doing in my other role can help magnify some of the work that both this organization as well as many others in the space are doing.
That is fantastic. And we would certainly welcome you to the committee, and the very issues of mental health, addiction, trauma, homelessness are issues that we are addressing. We could send to you the scope, which we have, Jennifer would be able to send to you. And if you wanted to follow up with a meeting with Nancy and me, we'd be happy to do that as well. And I'm grateful that you're considering it.
Thank you to you both. Any further questions for Member Walker? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the chair's verbal update. Chair Toth.
Thank you so much. First, thank you again for chairing these meetings and helping save what remains of my voice. Quick chief selection process update, not much to update, but in case you weren't aware, the job posting is live on various different sites, including our own site, magazines, and so on. It will remain open till January 16th. So last day to put in your name, both internal and external, will be January 16th. And then we will have some decisions to make for who to invite for first round of interviews. First round of interviews will take place second week of February. More decision making, we will narrow down the field, and then the second and final round of interviews will take place, I believe, March 1st, or at least the first week of March, followed by more difficult decisions from the board. But that takes us into March, putting in an offer, presumably some negotiations. If there's an external candidate, and actually even if there's an internal, making sure that there's notice periods built in. So we're probably looking at end of March, April, for new chief and deputy chief. Really, it'll depend on how long those negotiations and notice periods require. But we are well underway. So that will be exciting, and we'll obviously provide the information we can. Once we get into interviewing candidates, we don't share that information for hopefully obvious reasons. So there's not much we can share other than time frames, but look for an announcement in hopefully March. Next, just wanted to mention that, of course, Deputy Chief Betts has accepted a position in Peterborough as their new chief. He'll be their new chief as of January 9th. So this will be his last police board meeting. And he's not one I know for a lot of shined light on him, but I have to take this opportunity to thank him from the bottom of my heart for all the work he's done. It was, it's always, I'm sure, a challenge moving from other police services into a new police service, and a lot of adjusting. But one of the things that I so admire about what you've done during your time here is just the ability to get things done. I'll share one, and this is a very tiny sliver of a story in terms of the things you've done. But I remember I got, in this age of social media, a direct message from a member of the community about wanting London to be part of this bike community system where you would register your bike and it would be tracked. This must have been, you might have been like 2 months into the job, maybe. You were like brand new, and I just flipped it over to you. And, obviously, with the chief's permission, we didn't bypass Chief Owens. But it ended up in I'm sounding bad. It ended up in your lap. And I would say within 3 months, it had been adopted. And it was just, once you have something, you took it and you just were so dedicated. And we heard a little glimmer of that as well with Megan speaking about the femicide. And I think that is something that will really be missed, is that dedication. Every time, every ceremony, every community event, you were there. And I think a lot of people really valued what you had to contribute and your obvious dedication. So thank you. We wish you the best, truly. And I know Peterborough is lucky to have you, and it's our loss, and really their gain. But we hope you keep in touch. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Chair Toth. I have something scribbled down here for later in the agenda that says, say nice things about Stu. It says it, doesn't that say it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's Deputy Chief's handwriting right there. No, but you know what? If it's okay, maybe following what you just said, Chair Toth, we can maybe just add on to your report there. And I just want to say personally as well, Peterborough's gain is our loss. I've had an opportunity to work with you for a year now, Deputy Chief Betts. Your reputation preceded you. I've always found you to be incredibly attentive, incredibly accessible, professional. I don't have the breadth of background that you have with Chair Toth there, but I know that both internally here as a board, I think I can speak safely for the rest of the board members here and just say it's been an incredible professional to deal with such a consummate professional as yourself. And then externally, even before I joined the board here, your role in assisting Chief Williams and Deputy Chief McIntyre and the rest of the LPS to help navigate London through some of the most tumultuous, darkest days in our history, specifically dealing with the June 6th attacks. To see you and the rest of the senior team on the forefront of that line was a source of comfort for the rest of the community there. And so we'll miss you. You're always welcome back here if you ever want to come. Yeah, you know, if you ever want more policing than what Peterborough can offer. But I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of myself for that, for your service here to London. So appreciate it, sir. Thank you. I'm going to, with the liberty of the board, does anybody else want to say something nice about Stu before I open the mic?
Yeah. No, I'll be super quick. For me, it's your work ethic has been amazing. And so when we're tasked with, something that occurs internally or in the community, you always dove right in and you never backed down from a challenge and you took care of business. And as everybody knows, in the last few years, we've had a number of challenges in the community and even internally. And just thank you for bringing that work ethic every single day and for your support over the last 3.5, almost 4 years. And best of luck in Peterborough. Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy Chief Betts. Appreciate it. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. And I'll start, Chair Toth. Thank you. You were on my recruit selection panel when I came here. And I know now you're recruiting and leading that panel again for another deputy chief. And I appreciate you having the confidence in me. The board has changed. The composition of the board has changed since I was selected to come here. So I will, through you to the rest of that selection committee, thank you very much for having the confidence to select me as a deputy chief to come to London. I very much appreciate that. I will take a lot of what I've learned here in London. I learned from London. They say you learn everywhere you go, and there's absolutely no question what I have acquired here in terms of knowledge and really some of the challenges of a community that has a downtown that is afflicted with some of the challenges we have here is a community that I'm going to. And there will be things I have learned here that I can take there. And I know that I can reach out. There's only a phone call away in terms of support and questions and how are we dealing with things and how did we resolve things to be able to take to my new location. So I very much appreciate that. And our first and our last meeting as board to our newest members, thank you for that. I do appreciate your support today. Appreciate that. And Chief, thank you very much for your support, and Trish for yours as well. I think we've had a pretty good balanced team here in terms of strengths that we were able to apply and bring towards the organization. And I, for one, am better for that. So I leave the London Police Service taking away a lot, and I hope to apply that where I'm going. In fact, it will be, as you say, to their benefit, because I will have acquired an awful lot that I can bring there. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Deputy Chief Betts. And with that, I'll need a motion from one of our members that the board receive Chair Toth's monthly verbal report related to the business of the board there. Moved by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Member Walker. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. There's a little bit of a lag, Nancy. By the time you put your hand up, it feels like there's a, yeah, so.
That's okay. I get enough of them in there. I'm okay.
All right. So yeah, and it's also, what is it, 1:10 where you are, right, in the morning? So there you go. I didn't get that. Yeah, none of us did. All right, there we go. Siri wants to move the next one. So that being said, I believe we're on to, there was no new business here. Our next London Police Services Board public meeting was, is there an admin update? Okay. Oh, it's up here. It's in black and blue ink there. Oh yeah, I missed it. Go ahead, Ms. Foster.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Long day. Items are continually being added to your Move It portals. Keep an eye on that, folks. This is a portal that we share information among the board. Louis Correa event, which is a public event, is now set for Thursday, February 23rd, 6 p.m. So I know the board's got that in their calendars, but the community, you can talk about that out in the community, our media folks. And I always am keeping you up to date since we are embarking on a recruitment process for our executive. Windsor has, since our last meeting, named their next chief, Jason Belair, and I believe, I don't know the name, but St. Thomas has. Megan pointed that out earlier. Yeah, so that's my quick update.
Thanks, Ms. Foster. Any questions for Ms. Foster with regards to the administrative update? Seeing none, that's it. So just housekeeping. Next London Police Service Board public meeting, Thursday, January 19th. Same times as always. I can tick off, say nice things about Stu. That's done. All right, so I need a motion to adjourn. I'm going to look to Nancy. Motion to, there we go, there we go. Nancy, have fun at the World Cup Championship game. Send us pictures. We're looking forward to hearing from you there.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
All right.
cheers.
Get some sleep. All right, thanks. So moved by Nancy, seconded by Councillor Stevenson. No one opposed. We're good to go. Adjourned. Thanks, everybody. All right. Okay. Yeah, it's stuff in there. I know. I know. All right.
Really? Within the city that,
Go get.
that's a small place.
We're going to RBC Place board meeting now.
What time is that? 4:30. Is that at RBC?
I'm new.
Yeah, yeah. It's also, I was dealing with